You wake up. No alarm, no notification, no place you need to be in 30 minutes. The sun is just starting to change the sky from black to deep orange. You don't check anything. You just open your eyes and the day begins. For roughly 300,000 years, this was every single morning for every single human being alive on Earth. No schedules, no deadlines, no Monday. What did they actually do with all that time? The answer is stranger, richer, and more surprising than almost anyone expects. The first thing to understand is what they were not doing. They were not grinding, not hustling, not optimizing. Anthropologist Marshall Sahlins famously called hunter-gatherer societies the original affluent society, not because they had material wealth, but because their needs were modest and their means of meeting those needs were surprisingly efficient. His work, built on data including Richard Lee's fieldwork among the Jew/Huanzi people of the Kalahari in the 1960s, found that securing food took adults roughly 15 to 20 hours a week. The rest of the day was genuinely open. So what filled it? Let's reconstruct an actual day. Not a romantic fantasy, but a day grounded in the best available archaeological and anthropological evidence we have. You rise when your body tells you to. There is no cultural pressure to be up early. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, including research published by Jerome Siegel at UCLA, examining sleep patterns in 3 traditional societies across Africa and South America, found that people typically went to sleep a few hours after sunset and woke naturally around or just after sunrise. Nobody was sleep-deprived. Nobody was exhausted before the day started. The morning begins with movement. Not exercise, movement. You walk, maybe a few kilometers, maybe more, depending on what the group needs that day. Women often moved in small groups to gather plant foods, roots, berries, tubers, nuts, and seeds, scanning the landscape with a depth of ecological knowledge that took years to develop. Researchers studying this in detail, including the work of anthropologist Nurit Bird-David, describe this relationship with the environment as intimate and conversational, a kind of ongoing dialogue with a landscape your ancestors had read for generations. Men might move further, tracking animals across unfamiliar terrain, reading signs in the earth, the bent grass, the spacing of hoofprints, the freshness of dung. This required sustained focus, patience, and a kind of silent coordination with other hunters that built deep nonverbal trust over years. Here is something almost nobody tells you. Most days, the hunt failed. Not dramatically, just quietly. You tracked, you watched, you moved carefully for hours, and the animal moved away. You came back. You shared what others had gathered. You ate. Life continued. There was no shame in an unsuccessful hunt, no punishment, no consequence beyond the ordinary fact of trying again tomorrow. Anthropologists studying these patterns consistently note the absence of what we would call performance anxiety around food acquisition. You were part of a system that worked across the whole group, not a lone individual competing to produce. By midday, when the sun is high and the heat is serious, the day slows down. This is not laziness. This is intelligence. Moving hard in peak heat burns unnecessary energy and raises the risk of dehydration in an environment where water sources could be unpredictable. You rest, you talk, you sleep briefly, you groom each other, a behavior shared with our primate cousins that serves a social bonding function far beyond physical hygiene. Afternoon brings the second wave of activity. More gathering, more processing of food, tending to tools, making repairs to shelters, or carrying materials to a new campsite if the group was moving on. Children were not kept separate from this. They watched, they imitated, they played games that mimicked adult skills. There were no schools and no classrooms, but learning was constant, embedded in every hour of the day. Then, evening. And this is where something remarkable happened. Polly Wiessner, an anthropologist who spent decades studying the Jew-Huanzi, published research in 2014 analyzing the content of hundreds of recorded conversations across different times of day. During daylight hours, about 80% of conversations were practical, economic, or involve disputes and complaints about other people. Normal social friction, the kind of talk you might hear in any workplace. But at night, around the fire, something shifted. More than 80% of nighttime conversation involves storytelling. Myths, histories, accounts of distant places and unusual people, moral tales, jokes, dreams. The fire extended the social day by several hours, and those hours were used almost entirely for narrative. Wiessner argued that this firelight storytelling was not entertainment in the passive modern sense. It was the mechanism by which values were transmitted across generations, by which the group's shared identity was maintained, by which individuals understood their place in a web of relationships extending far beyond their immediate camp. You told stories because your group needed you to, because the children listening needed to know who they were and what mattered, because the adults around you needed the reminder too. Before sleep, there was often music. Bone flutes found at sites like Hohlfels Cave in Germany, dated to over 40,000 years ago, are among the oldest musical instruments ever discovered. Percussion, rhythm, singing, almost certainly dance. These were not luxuries or leisure activities in the modern sense. Researchers studying the neurological effects of synchronized group music, including work by Robin Dunbar at Oxford, have found that shared rhythmic activity dramatically raises pain thresholds and produces a powerful sense of social bonding. Making music together was social glue. It was medicine. It was the thing that kept the group coherent enough to survive another season. And then you slept. Deeply, fully, without artificial light pulling your brain out of its natural cycle. Your nervous system reset, your muscles repaired, your memory consolidated the day's learning. You did not lie awake worrying about tomorrow, because tomorrow looked more or less like today, and today had been enough. Now here is the question that ancient life forces back onto modern life. What do you do all day? Most people in developed economies work 40 to 60 hours a week on tasks that feel urgent, but produce a peculiar kind of exhaustion that rest doesn't fully fix. They commute, they scroll, they sit in meetings that could have been emails. They come home too tired to do the things that would actually restore them. They sleep badly. They feel a strange hollowness that comfort doesn't fill. Your ancestors spent their days moving through a landscape they loved, talking to people they trusted, making things with their hands, telling stories by firelight, playing music, and sleeping until their bodies were done sleeping. They were not free from hardship. A broken bone could kill you. A drought could end everything. Life was genuinely precarious in ways modern people rarely face. But the texture of their days, the grain of ordinary life, hour by hour, contains something that modern schedules almost never include: enough time to actually be a human being. You wake up. No alarm, no notification, no place you need to be in 30 minutes. Somewhere deep in your biology, that still feels like exactly how a day is supposed to begin.